From the Bowling Green Daily News, we've got a Kentucky State police officer tased the shit out of a Bowling Green man and killed him. So it was a crash. There was a vehicle crash investigation at the William H. Natcher Parkway. Kentucky State Police responded to a report of a single vehicle collision near the Parkway's 4-mile marker on 10:52 p.m. Saturday, according to a news release from the KSP Post 3 in Bowling Green. KSP Sergeant Jeremy Smith, Trooper Briston Smith, and Warren County Sheriff's Deputy Shane Montgomery found a 1995 Toyota 4Runner overturned and on its driver's side in the northbound lanes, according to the release. The driver, Michael Roll, 52-year-old Michael Roll of Bowling Green, was combative. This is absolutely incredible. The medical center EMS treated Roll at the scene and took him to the medical center at Bowling Green, where he was pronounced dead. He was just combative. He was just combative. They said it looked like he was under the influence, and they took a taser. They said they used a taser to try to arrest Roll, and then he continued to resist briefly before becoming unconscious. So, I mean, an accident just happened. An accident just happened, and now we're pulling fucking tasers out. Come on, we've got to have the police officers have got to be on our side. They have got to care about, they got to protect and serve. To protect and serve the public, not just their own. Corruption is when you only give a shit about your friends and your family. That's all the cops give a shit about. They care about their friends, their family. They're not going to put themselves in danger to actually save you, but if they can fuck you over or tase you to death. R.I.P. Michael Roll, 52-year-old Michael Roll of Bowling Green. R.I.P. This shit happens way too much. 19 Kentuckians were killed last year. This isn't the first time Bowling Green has killed somebody. They killed that one man by the train tracks maybe a year or two ago. He had no weapons, he had no guns, he was really far, like 200 feet out, and got shot and killed for some reason. I heard eventually that police officer left the force. But seriously, what the fuck? Michael Roll of Bowling Green is dead. 52-year-old Michael Roll of Bowling Green. He gets into a car wreck, he's in an accident, and then you have 2 state police and a local sheriff's deputy come up on the scene, and now the dude's dead. So it's like, hey, you know, a lot of times car crashes can seem suicidal. It was Emil Durkheim on suicide sociology, the father of sociology. But if that's the case, it's basically like a person jumping out of a building being unsuccessful about it. So it just absolutely sucks. You know, the guy, Michael Roll, 52-year-old Michael Roll, gets into a car accident, and perhaps that was a suicide, a cry for help, a type of suicidal behavior. Maybe he was drinking and driving, got into an accident. Well, now he's in a crashed vehicle. He's stuck in the vehicle. The police officers want to get him out, right, save him so they can arrest him. Or maybe they just want to arrest him and beat him up and didn't give a shit that he was in an accident. And he was combative. That's why Michael Roll died, because he was combative. Not that he resisted arrest, not that he was, attacking or assaulting, but he was combative. So I've heard people call me combative just for being argumentative. And neither one of those are crimes. Argumentative, I think you're wrong, I don't think you're correct, and the person was an asshole. The person was being a fucking oppressor. And so, how come the police can't come on the scene as our heroes and save us? 1 million poor people in Kentucky were number one for the, everything. Obesity, toothlessness, poverty, poor education, poor health care. It was poor, sick, and dumb. Every major indicator is on the bottom here. And we have more police brutality. We got more prisons per capita. And I don't understand why. We have all these police officers, so why can't they help? Why can't they be fucking decent people? Why do they always got to shoot first and hurt first? Why can't we live in a society where the cops are actually out here for us, where the police officers want to do a good job and they want to do the best and they want the community to be okay? It's like, man, I know there's wild and crazy behavior out here, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So educate people. 52-year-old Michael Roll is a white guy, and so it's like they're saying race was a factor, which is unfortunate. It's like, thank God it's a white guy, because, nobody's going to give a fuck about him. Thank God. Thank God it's a white guy. Because if it's a black person, you know, there might be national media attention on it, but it's a fucking white guy. Michael Roll, 52-year-old of Bowling Green. R.I.P., man. He says he was intoxicated, became combative towards the cops, and then they shot him with a stun gun to try and arrest him. And Michael Roll, 52-year-old Michael Roll, Bowling Green, resisted for a short time before he became unconscious. So, you know, like that, the whole thing, a stun gun, if you're going to stun this shit out of somebody and you just keep stunning them until their heart gives out, you're a barbarian. You're fucking sadistic as fuck. And he's drunk. He's just got into an accident. He's going to go to jail now, right? So he's fucked up his car, fucked up his life, and so the cops went ahead and took him out. Absolutely amazing development. One of the first times I've actually heard about anything like this happening in Kentucky. Kentucky, there have been murders all over Kentucky, northwest, east, and south. But now in Laurel County, the constable, Bobby Joe Smith, 37 years old, of London, is accused of fatally shooting Brandon Stanley at the A&B Quick Stop in East Bernstadt back in March. They said he was attempted to serve a warrant, so this is an amazing development. An indictment is not just an accusation of a possible felony, and it's second-degree manslaughter, which isn't first-degree killing. But the story that I've heard, the report that I've heard, what happened is he goes into the store, he's in the store, he's trying to arrest the guy, he's got one shot on the front of him, one shot in the back of him, and the guy was unarmed, and that was it. So there's this inside the store, so there's going to be videotape. There's going to be a trial looking at the Bobby Joe Smith case like very closely, and him killing Brandon Stanley. And Brandon Stanley was a family man, and him getting shot in the back, the whole situation just seems like so really fucked up. And I think he might have been, you know, he sold drugs or something about drugs. That's why he had the warrant out for his arrest to begin with. But there was a $50,000 bond. Bobby Joe Smith was indicted, and so now he's got to show up for a jury trial. He's got to. Let's see how fair the criminal justice system actually is when it comes to Bobby Joe Smith. I think this is some amazing stuff. This is remarkable. Before, a few years ago, there's like a sense of justice now. But cops never were charged, never went to jail. They got away with everything that they ever did. So there's a change. I'd like to commend the Laurel County grand jury, the 12 members of the grand jury, also the county attorney, because they made the right decision. An indictment is just probable cause that a crime might have happened, and it's supposed to be the firewall to stop frivolous felonies. But this isn't a frivolous felony case. There's a dead body, and if the criminal justice system is fair, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, then we'll see how wonderful and fair it is. I usually think it's a slaughterhouse. You get accused of a crime, you walk into fucking courthouse, the judge thinks you're guilty, and you're just fucked. And that's just how the system here in Kentucky works. You get accused by, a cop accuses you of a crime, you're just fucked. And apparently in Laurel County, the grand jurors and the county attorney in Laurel County, the county attorney had to have presented in a non-biased or somewhat, he had to, you know, the way it was presented, the grand jurors thought that a crime could have occurred. Kevin Berry and Jason Back led the investigation, and the presentation that was given to them, I'm not for sure, it had to been by the county attorney, but I guess the detectives came in, but the presentation ultimately led the grand jury to indict Bobby Joe Smith. So they actually indicted the constable that killed this man. And I think it's amazing. I think it's wonderful. The war on drugs is bullshit. When it comes to, you have to survive. Kentucky has 1 million poor people out here. And if anything, we need to help people. You know, if that man over there is addicted to heroin and he's fucked up every day, I feel sorry for him. I don't want to ruin his life anymore. I'm like, man, why do you keep doing this? Do you need someone to talk to? What's the deal? That's the way we're going to help with the drug problem. Love. Nita Johnson, the Sentinel Echo, constable indicted for manslaughter, shot Clay County resident while serving a warrant. Bobby Joe Smith, 37, was named in a one-count indictment for the March 4th shooting death of Brandon Stanley, 30 years old, of Manchester. So, I mean, again, he was present with his attorney, Conrad Cessna, in Laurel Circuit Court Friday, so it'll now go to the Circuit Court Judge of Laurel County, which I'm not sure who that is. There's a district judge and a circuit court judge. District is the misdemeanors, the circuit court is the felonies and the big cases, and the family cases too. So Cessna entered a not guilty plea on Smith's behalf and requested that Smith be allowed until 4:30 p.m. Friday to post $50,000 fully secured or a $100,000 property bond. That bond was posted in the Laurel Circuit Clerk's office at 10:30 a.m. Is now set to appear for a pre-trial hearing on March 28th. So in 8 days from now, Bobby Joe Smith has a pre-trial hearing, and then that will, he either gets a bench trial. If the bench trial happens, then that just means there's corruption with the judge. But I assume that they won't do it that way, because that's in convincing one person. Jury, you got to convince 6 or 12. But it might be easy just to convince one person. So the pretrial, that's what they're going to decide on the pretrial, is a jury trial or a bench trial, and then go from there. So that's remarkable. I mean, it was in East Bernstead A and B Market at the intersection of 3094 and 3434 Old Richmond Road. And he said Smith went into the store to serve the warrant. Smith allegedly then shot Stanley twice, one being a direct hit to the chest, according to the Laurel County Coroner Doug Bowling, according to an article. So now we're seeing essentially Bobby Joe Smith get charged with some of the similar things that you have. This Brandon Stanley, they said, had been indicted by a Clay County grand jury the day prior on charges of bail jumping and persistent felony offender. So the article states Stanley failed to appear in Clay County Court for sentencing on a felony charge January 4th, 2016. And then a warrant for his arrest was issued by the Commonwealth with a bond of $75,000. So the war on drugs, he's not a danger to anybody, he's not going to hurt anybody. It's the war that actually makes drugs dangerous. Now look what happens. It means your life is at stake. Persistent felony offender, bail jumping. You know, that's not killing, it's not murder, it's not rape, it's not stealing or violence. And those are the worst things you could do to another person. It's not good, but, you know, so he might get away with this. But, you know, I think it's actually good that some sense of justice. But when you look at the Bowling Green case, they killed a man. That's an execution. To execute a person, you got to get a conviction. They got to go through the process, the rigmarole. And then you got to push for the death penalty. I mean, it's a huge process. The last person that was killed in Kentucky slit the throats of 2 children, and he was all too willing to make sure that he gets the death penalty. That's the last person. So you got to be willing to die, and you have to do some heinous crime, you know. But here we have police officers that are just executing people out on the street, just executing them out on the street. The investigation is ongoing, being led by a lieutenant at Kentucky State Police Post 15 out of Columbia. They resist arrest. They said he resisted arrest for a short period and then went unconscious. The EMS were called to the scene, treated him, took him to the medical center, and then he was declared dead. How'd they treat him? What'd they do? They put second-degree manslaughter. Bobby Joe Smith, 37, indicted on second-degree manslaughter. Now, Bobby Joe Smith isn't one of the establishment. He's just like everybody else. The rule of law means nobody is above the rule of law. That's what how a democracy is supposed to work. Nobody is above the rule of law, meaning if a police officer commits a crime, they can be held to account. So a lot of people say, oh, cops are all good. Oh, really? All cops are good? Well, why don't the cops arrest the bad cops? Or why don't they arrest the white-collar criminals? If they're so damn good, why don't they fucking arrest them? Because of the thin blue line. It doesn't matter if, you know, one of your own boys fucks up. No, that's not what you do. That's a bad reflection on you, and you don't want criminals under the guise of a badge going around victimizing people. How can you trust a person to do right? If they've hurt people, they're going to hurt more. That's not a good police piece. For essentially decades, you've had the same states that vote for the same political party for decades, since JFK. There's a new trend in the 2000s, but essentially you can stack up about 40 states that are unquestionably, unapologetically Democrat or Republican. They will only vote one way, and that's it. And that's, you know, that sucks to be them, because only the swing states matter. Only the swing states matter. So if you're Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Colorado, Nevada, Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, or New Hampshire, You matter. You're politically relevant, okay? So Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Colorado, Nevada, Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. But if you're Kentucky or Connecticut or Washington State... So before the American Revolution, we actually had 4 world wars, 4 French and Indian wars. There was the French and Indian War, which George Washington started, but there's King William's War, Queen Anne's War, and King George's War, sort of the War of Jenkins' Ear. So we've had, you know, these massive wars before the American Revolution, but if we were to just start from 1776 to today, we have been at war 222 years of the 239 years that we've been in existence. 220, that means you have a 93% chance if you pick any year out of the 239, 240 years that America has been in existence, you have a 93% chance of picking a year of when we was at war. What are the years that we haven't been at war? These are kind of interesting, but, I mean, what the fuck? We got to be killing always, nonstop? So not only have we been at war 93% of the time, out of 240 years, 222 years we've been at war as a nation, the United States of America, the 50 states with the territories, right, starting with the colonies, that whole narrative. But we are an empire today. Somebody was saying, well, we're an empire like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. Yeah, because those are such fucking great guys. What's the next one? Napoleon, who wanted to re-enslave the Haitians after they had the only true blue revolution in all world history. The slaves, the oppressed, got their freedom. And so the fact that we're an empire matters. I had some French friends that just called us the empire. That's what they referred to us as, the empire. So we're not electing a president. We're electing an imperial emperor. We're electing an emperor. And what kind of person do you want to be? When I look at the years that we've been at peace, I mean, there's nothing that strikes me. In the year 2000, we were at peace. Just 2000, though. Not 99, not 98. 1997, we were at peace. None of the other 90s, just 97. So here are the years. There's 1976, 77, 78, which was the end of Carter, or the end of Ford, the beginning of Carter. FDR had about 5 years of isolationism from 1935 to 1940, right after the Great Depression. Then 1897, Cleveland, end of Cleveland, the beginning of McKinley, we were at peace. 1830, 1829, under Andrew Jackson in the beginning of his term. John Quincy Adams, 1826, 1828. 1807, 1808, 1809, Thomas Jefferson, and then 1796, 1797, John Adams. All this in perspective, 91, 93% of the time that America's been in existence, we've always had to have an enemy to bomb and to kill. We always had to have that scapegoat. Any year from 1776 till today, you have a over 90% chance that we was involved in some war. In that calendar year, no U.S. president is truly a peacetime president. I thought that maybe Carter was, but when I looked at Carter, there was the proxy war in Afghanistan, and then I want to say Nicaragua was going on too. So that's fascinating stuff. There's also 2 more findings. There's the U.S. has never gone a decade without war, and the only time that we weren't at war at like a long duration was right after the Great Depression, and for 5 years we were isolationist from 35 to 1940. So that's it. 22 years out. Looking at this list of wars too, there's a lot that I'm not totally familiar with. I've heard of the Chickamauga Wars in the very beginning, right? The American Revolution goes to 1783, but the Chickamauga Wars were going on at the same time. And then you also had the Pennamite Yankee War, and then the Oconee War, which is in 1784. So the Pennamite Yankee War, the Oconee War. There's the Northwest Indian War, so that's, that would be your Washington and some of your John Adams. But there's no major war in the end of John Adams and the beginning of Thomas Jefferson, but then the Quasi-War comes up, and then the first Barbary War. And these wars are wars that Chris Hitchens used to justify the Iraq War, because this is great Thomas Jefferson fighting against Muslims, for whatever, the Quasi-War, the first Barbary War. But I mean, these wars, it's why 93 we're invading Mexico and Hawaii, 94, 95, 96 we're invading Mexico. There's Spanish-American War, the Battle of Leech Lake, Chippewa Indian disturbances in 1898. I mean, what the fuck? There's the Banana Wars. My God, the Banana Wars goes on for decades, from 1934 to 1914. For 20 years, you got the Banana Wars. For 20 years, you got the Vietnam War and the Korean War, the Jew-Yaga uprising. In the 1960s and 1970s, you had two presidents that got booted out of office because of the Iraq War, because of one war. But we are in a war on terror against the entire world. Terrorism everywhere, right? But war is terrorism. So it depends on who's defining what, you know, that if it's small violence, then that's terrorism. But if it's large violence, that's acceptable. What the fuck is the difference? Put a war in the war, or war will put an end to us. So they're talking about Hamburger Hill right now, the History Channel is, and we kicked out two presidents for Vietnam War. We kicked out LBJ and we kicked out Nixon. Albeit not exactly for the Vietnam War, but yeah, because of the war. He kept it going for another 4 fucking years. And, you know, his peace talks might have set the path to fucking peace, but he extended it for another 4 years, plus bombed Cambodia and did all those extra war crimes. Regardless, some people say that today's conversation actually mimics the conversation that we were having back in the 60s and 70s. Unfortunately, the 60s lost. Ask Hunter S. Thompson. He could see where the high water mark was, where it looked like it was inevitable and we were going to win. History was on our side. And then you see the high water mark, and then the wave came back, and no more. So the 60s failed. Look at today. We've been at a war on terrorism for 15 years. 15 fucking. We got the Gipper, old Tippecanoe and Tyler 2, Old Hickory, Old Rough and Ready, Honest Abe, Big Steve. Grover Cleveland's nickname was Big Steve. The Gipper was Ronald Reagan, Old Tippecanoe, Tyler 2, that was their, I don't know. Hickory, Old Hickory was Andrew Jackson. Old Rough and Ready is the Louisville cat, died by eating cherries and milk. Zachary Taylor. Honest Abe is Abe Lincoln. And Grover Cleveland's, his nickname was Big Steve, because apparently his first name was Steve. So, what is Bernie Sanders' nickname going to be? I haven't thought of any good ones, but I think it's a good discussion, because apparently nicknames make people feel, you know, he doesn't even have a middle name, so automatically, you know, he's kind of, I thought the old Jew, that old Polish Jew, but more as, you know, in terms of, so Ronald Reagan was called the Gipper. The Gipper, right? When people have nicknames, it makes you feel like you know them better. The Gipper. And then you had Old Honest Abe for Lincoln. Then you had Old Rough and Ready, Zachary Taylor, the president from Louisville who ate bad cherries and milk and died because of the bad cherries and milk. James Monroe, last of the cocked hats. So they all have nicknames, okay? That's essentially my point. Old Hickory is, you know, that's, what the fuck, that genocidal Trail of Tears motherfucker, Andrew Jackson. Grover Cleveland was known as Big Steve, because his first name was Steve. So what is Bernie Sanders' nickname going to be? What is Bernie Sanders going to be called? I kind of like that old Polish Jew, but out of love, not out of hate, you know? That old Polish Jew is going to... What a better way to fuck up the legacy of Hitler and fascism than by electing a democratic socialist Polish Jew. It was the invasion of Poland that got the Allies to declare war on Hitler and Jews, right? Hitler just did not like Jewish people for whatever reason. So when I look at history, the Gipper, Ronald Reagan had a nickname, the Gipper. You had Old Hickory, Old Rough and Ready, Honest Abe. Grover Cleveland was known as Big Steve. Grover Cleveland, Big Steve. Apparently his first name is Steve. But that old Polish Jew, how you going to fuck up the legacy of Hitler and fascism? By electing that old Polish Jew. I'd rather have a person who is anti-war with their finger on the button than a chicken hawk, you know, war. So, random thought. I didn't realize it was so dark. But, just thinking about my ears. You know how they say you have to like wash behind your ears. I didn't know that. Like I watched the movie and I was like, what the heck? And then I guess you don't. It's hard. It's a little small spot, right? You don't realize. Anyways, the thing I was thinking about was like usually right there in the nub. Like if I was to continue the earlobes on down. Sometimes I'll get like a little, like a hard zit or a pimple about to be formed. And sometimes it's like a good little fucking rock. When I squeeze it, it'll like shoot out like a fucking, a stream out about that far. And it's always like right there too. I mean, it's good now. I'm clean now. But, random